Hello, Anthony.
Hello, Claudine.
We want to talk about something that can seem a little scary.
Oh, yeah.
IRS Revenue Officers, IRS Revenue Agents. A lot of people have issues where suddenly a revenue officer is knocking at their door. But first, what exactly is an IRS Revenue Officer?
Well, we're talking about revenue officers and IRS revenue agents. They're actually two different things. Okay, so the easy way to remember this, IRS revenue officer is in charge of collections.
Okay.
Revenue agent is in charge of assessments.
Okay.
Generally. Now, there's just one exception for that. We'll probably talk about that in a little bit.
Okay, so what are the general powers of an IRS Revenue Officer? What can they do? Can they lien? Can they levy?
They can issue liens, they can issue levies or garnishments, and they can start the seizure process against you to take your property if they feel that you haven't been responsive and you have assets that can pay the debt.
Without a court order?
Some of the stuff does not require a court order. It depends on what it is. If it's your primary residence, they will need to get a court involved. But for some property, they don't need a court order. It's simply grabbing it, putting it up for auction.
Now, can either one come to you unannounced? Will they send you letters first, or will they just show up?
A revenue officer has to show up unannounced.
Oh.
Yeah, that's sort of there's probably two reasons for that. One is so that the IRS, can make sure they have the right person. If you could call someone, well, now there's so many people scamming, who's going to believe that it's actually a revenue officer? Some people do because the scams still work, but a majority of people will say, well, no, I'm on this site called IRSMedic.com, and it says that there's a lot of scam artists posing as IRS agents. So when they show up in person, that's not a call center in India because they're right there. So and the other reason why is because it rattles your cage.
Oh.
Yeah, because someone's actually in your face now. And usually when a case gets to a revenue officer, it's one of two things. It's been going on for a while, or it's such of an intense consequences. They want to get someone on it right away. And those are the type of things there are where we have unpaid payroll taxes. And also when the assessments are large, and where the IRS feels that they're going to lose their ability to collect if they go through the normal channels. The example is Al Sharpton. He does some clever things. And he actually had something called a jeopardy levy against him. Before his taxes were even filed, the IRS issued a levy against him. Just to say, because we're like, you are doing something so shady here.
Wow.
So that's a good indication of, there's probably something criminal going on. They just couldn't prove it or didn't want to prosecute. So that's a pretty serious thing when you get that jeopardy levy.
Now, what about if you live internationally? Are there international revenue officers? Do they knock on your door in your lovely villa in Spain?
That's right. Because there are people around the world who owe money to the IRS. Because around the world, you make money, the IRS gets a claim to that. That's that lovely citizenship-based taxation that we are not quite fond of.
Repeal FATCA.
Repeal FATCA, and we want residence-based taxation. That would be much better. So the IRS has a lot of people around the world owe money. Revenue agents, revenue officers are assigned, but they're in the U.S. And there might, I read about things where the IRS says they have field agents around the world. I'm not sure exactly what that is. We deal with a lot of cases, and so I haven't dealt with a revenue agent that was permanently assigned overseas. Now, ones that happen to be in a country for a temporary assignment, sure. But the one who's actually living there and working there and going around, no, and a lot of countries would require, you have to get permission for the IRS to show up to commit to do an audit or anything like that. So you have these revenue officers, and I believe it's Maryland is the office that many of them are from. And so they're sort of in this position. How do we make first contact with a taxpayer in Spain? And the IRS might not have the budget for them to do some traveling. Maybe they would love to go, probably. So how does the IRS revenue officer make first contact? And now you're sort of stuck with kind of letters and phone, right?
That you hope get through.
Yeah.
Now, let's say you have a meeting with a revenue officer. What can you expect? What are they going to do?
Well, if you have a revenue officer, they're most likely looking to collect a debt. So they're trying to determine, hey, how much can this person pay? And a lot of times people will go in. I think one of the worst situations is where you have someone to say, yeah, I just owe this. I just got to come clean with the IRS. This has been going on too long. I'm just going to go be reasonable, be open, be honest. Just tell them what they need to know. And I would say that's a fine idea if you have an unlimited source of money to pay your debt. But if that was true, you probably would have written that check a while ago. So the fact is that you had difficulty paying this for some legitimate reason. So I think you have to take, an honest inventory of that fact. So going in to say, yeah, I just screwed up. Here's everything. Be fair with me. That's really one of the worst things, because their job is to see what's the maximum I can get out of you right now. Now that answer is different than solving your problem forever. Because if and this is an incredibly common thing, someone says, okay, here's all the money I owe for back taxes. And the IRS Revenue Officer says, okay, great. You've got rid of your back tax problem. And then the person goes and next year they file their returns to say, oh boy, I owe a whole bunch of more money for this year. I don't have any money left. And then they have a new bill. Mm-hmm. And because there wasn't a real plan to say, well, what's a real budget? And so that's really dangerous to do. The other time where you're going to have an interview with a revenue officer, and this is what I was talking at the beginning, is the revenue officers do assess something, and it's called the trust fund recovery penalty against all willful people who didn't deposit the correct amount of employee taxes. Mm-hmm. So this is the situation where they're going to go around to see what's the unpaid tax, who are we going to assess against, and they're going to look for, you don't have to necessarily be the business owner or have an equity interest in it. The IRS feels you're responsible. And this can happen a lot where you have controllers or even bookkeepers. Sometimes the IRS will say, oh, this is the person calling the shots. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily. And then other times when this happens, sometimes a business owner says, what do you mean? They've been paid? I haven't gotten any notices. And it's the bookkeeper or somebody who's been embezzling. And
it's a lovely new Jaguar,
like,
Alice
wow,
has.
That's sort of uncomfortable when you find that out.
Okay, now I have one question that leads into last is, let's say you do have a meeting with a revenue officer. Do you have to answer the questions on the spot, or can you take time and hire representation? And if you hire representation, does it make you look guilty?
Okay. So the way I would do it is that you shouldn't, this is really why you want to hire someone, because I know the answers ahead of time. I know exactly what they're going to look for ahead of time. So we're able to meet with a client in our own time to say, okay, these are the questions we're going to have to answer. So when we have an answer that isn't great, we need to explain it. Mm-hmm. To say, okay, well, we're going to need backup for that explanation. When you're asked something on the spot and you don't have the plan,
and you're nervous,
you're going to say something. You're going to probably say something you wish you didn't. You might get frustrated and you might lash out. None of it's helpful. This stuff is all predictable. When you know what the revenue officer's goal is and how they work, everything they do is predictable. Even when they act the way you don't want to, this is not the first time they've done something crazy. Mm-hmm. So you try to protect for that. So I would say you would never want to go in without knowing all the questions and without having all of your answers. That's a really big mistake. So that's why you really should get somebody. You know
what? I love when people hire us and we're in the console and they sign the paperwork and they go, oh my God, I'm just so glad I never have to talk to that guy again, because you're going to talk to him. Yeah. Being the go-between.
Right. Now there's some sometimes you do have to talk, give a little testimony on the trust fund.
Yep.
But when you're right there, like, well, we already asked you these questions and we already played devil's advocate with you so that you're prepared for this and you know what's going to happen. So you're not surprised and it can go smoothly.
Now, does it make you look guilty?
Now, does it make you look guilty, right? I mean, only criminals hire
attorneys.
I'm like, okay, criminals in every large corporation in America. Everybody hires attorneys. I mean, the people who hire most attorneys are usually politicians. Well, that's probably a bad example. But I would say this, and I would say, does it make you look guilty? I would answer it in a different way. And, I've been doing this for a bit of time, and I've had the pleasure of really getting to know some really great revenue officers and revenue agents too. You'll be surprised that, the world is not like this thing where you have these mean IRS people looking to end your life. They do exist. Most of them don't care enough about you to do that. And then you have some who really take it personally when they're the ones who have to be the person who is ruining someone's life. And that's what happens. And they hate it. They hate it because they're looking at this person like, oh my God, you are this naive to think that my job isn't to screw you over. Okay, because if you were my client, this is what I would tell you to do. I would tell you to do this, this, and this. And now you would actually get something that would solve it. But because I represent the government, I cannot give you legal advice.
Oh, they can't.
They can't. They want to, and sometimes they cheat a little. Maybe they'll give you a hint. Because they really, really find it obnoxious
I
when...
could see where if, say, they were like, you should get an attorney, and you hire an attorney, and that attorney screws you over and doesn't fix the problem.
Yeah.
You can go back to the revenue officer and
said,
he told me to hire an
right,
attorney.
so they can't tell you exactly to do it because that's sort of legal advice. They want to see this resolved. Now, a lot of them like dealing with us too, because we get the, like we want this done. The quicker we get it done, and so we know exactly what they're looking for. We know what they need for their manager for their group manager to sign off on it. So we're a little bit ahead of the game. We can anticipate everything, whereas they have to deal with a person who's just sort of coming up to speed. We know all the lingo. We know what their expectations. Otherwise, they have to spend that time to explain, what their role is. And a lot of them, they'll do everything, by the book. They just wish that you would get it. And it really is heartbreaking to them because they know there's a lot of people out there who aren't so honest. They know that there's a lot of people out there who aren't so honest, and they get away with it. And now it's you, the one who is honest, who is trying to do something nice, who bears the brunt. That's really what drives them nuts. And there's a really intense, I would say that's probably the most intense reason for job dissatisfaction, is because revenue officers are many times required to be inhumane.
Wow.
And they wish you would do something about it.
Right. All right. Well, if you have a revenue officer or agent assigned to your case or a tax problem you're concerned about, don't hesitate to contact us, 888-727-8796 or info@IRSMedic.com. You can like and comment below and make sure that you subscribe to our channel so you get more awesome tax updates. Thank you so much for watching.